Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are tracing what I honestly believe is one of the most epic survival stories in human history. We aren't talking about the survival of an empire or a species here, but the survival of a game. A stubborn, brilliant, completely relentless game that just refused to die. We're going to explore how humanity's most persistent and popular pastime survived against all the odds, evolving through absolute chaos to become the global phenomenon we know today.
Okay, to really wrap our heads around this, let's just establish the sheer scale of the sport we're talking about today. 4 billion. Think about that. Right now, on any given Saturday, 4 billion fans, that is literally half the human population, are watching 22 people in a net. They're tuning in from every country, speaking every language. It's honestly the closest thing we have to a unified global language. But getting to this staggering number? Yeah, that was absolutely not a straight line.
In fact, the central mystery we're diving into today is how exactly a banned street brawl became the beautiful game. Because let me tell you, this game wasn't born in some pristine stadium with manicured grass and massive corporate sponsors. No, it was born in the mud. It was banned by angry kings, it was blamed for wars, and, if some ancient legends are to be believed, it was even played with human skulls. This game nearly destroyed itself multiple times over.
Now, this whole obsession, it really stems from a universal human impulse. Long before the Great Wall of China was even finished, humans were kicking things. It turns out that kicking a round object as hard as you can is basically baked into our DNA. Kick-based ball games just popped up independently across ancient civilizations. You had episkiros in ancient Greece and harpastum in ancient Rome, which actually was a violent, rough cousin that looked a lot more like modern rugby. The urge to play this game was literally everywhere.
But a brilliant early example of this core mechanic thriving was nearly 3,000 years ago in Han Dynasty China. They played a game called cuju, which literally translates to kickball. Soldiers would dribble a leather ball stuffed with feathers and hair, and the whole goal was to kick it through this tiny opening in a silk net strung between two poles. And crucially, just like today, absolutely no hands were allowed. It's so remarkably similar, in fact, that FIFA officially recognizes cuju as the earliest documented form of the sport.
All right, let's fast forward a bit to medieval England, because this is where things take a seriously unhinged turn. The sport morphed into something called mob football, and calling it a sport is being incredibly generous. It was basically a controlled riot. Entire villages, sometimes hundreds of people at once, would just brawl in the mud, trying to drag an inflated pig's bladder to a goal that might be a mile away in the next town over. There were zero rules, broken bones were super common, and honestly, deaths were not exactly rare either.
Which brings us to the sport's very first major antagonist, the government. Kings absolutely despise this game. Just look at King Edward II's royal decree in 1314. He flat out banned the game in London because it was causing mass riots and, this is the best part, because it was distracting men from their archery practice. You have to remember, back in the 1300s, archery wasn't just a fun hobby, it was a matter of literal national security. Football was seen as a highly dangerous, treasonous distraction. Now, what is truly remarkable here is the sheer, undeniable stubbornness of humanity. Over the next 300 years, English monarchs banned the game 30 separate times. 30! And do you want to guess the government's win rate against these medieval football fans? Exactly 0%. The players completely ignored the kings every single time. It's like, the more the authorities tried to kill the game, the more the common people just insisted on playing it.
So, amazingly, the game survives the Middle Ages, and as we roll into the 1800s, football moves off those muddy village greens and right into England's elite boarding schools. Places like Eton, Harrow, Rugby, and Winchester take it up. But the game suddenly faced a brand new existential crisis. Nobody could agree on the rules. If a student from Rugby played a student from Eton, it was total chaos. One guy's picking up the ball and running, the other guy's trying to kick it, and a third guy's just tripping people. It was a complete and utter mess.
Well, this absolute chaos simply couldn't stand, especially as these students went off to university and wanted to, actually keep playing together. So, frustrated university students finally decided to standardize the madness. Step 1 was the 1848 Cambridge Rules, which was an early, kind of desperate attempt to referee these mismatched games. But Step 2, that is where history was truly made. A legendary meeting in October 1863 at a pub in London called the Freemasons' Tavern. Representatives from 11 clubs sat down to hammer out one unified rulebook, once and for all. So the real climax here at the tavern is when two totally distinct ideologies literally split the room in half. On one side, you had the kicking game crowd. They wanted a game of skill, no hands allowed,
and absolutely no kicking your opponent in the shins. On the flip side was the carrying game faction. They wanted to run with the ball in their hands, and they fiercely defended hocking, which basically meant legally kicking your opponent's shins as hard as you could to bring them down. The argument actually got so intense that the carrying faction walked right out of the pub. They left to form what we now know today as rugby. The clubs that stayed behind, they banned hands, they banned hacking, and they formed the Football Association, or the FA. And here is a super fun fact for you. Forming the association accidentally gave Americans the word they use today. The word soccer is literally just a British slang abbreviation of the word association. So, one pub argument gave us two distinct sports forever.
With the rules finally locked in, the game entered the industrial era. As Britain industrialized, football became this massive, unstoppable working-class obsession. Factory owners and churches actually started sponsoring teams just to keep their workers occupied and out of trouble on the weekends. This is exactly why so many globally famous clubs today carry names like United or started as church sides. From there, British sailors, merchants, and engineers packed up their boots and exported this newly organized game all over the globe.
And the really beautiful part of this export is what the rest of the world actually did with it. When the game reached places like Argentina, Brazil, Italy, and Spain, local communities didn't just passively adopt some British export. No, they completely reinvented it. They injected their own culture, developing totally unique styles of play, legendary local rivalries, and deeply rooted obsessions. A game born in the English mud was now being played with flair and incredible passion on the streets of South America and Southern Europe.
The sheer speed at which this localized passion went global is just stunning. By 1888, England had a fully functioning professional league. Just 16 years later, in 1904, 7 countries got together and founded FIFA, a proper international governing body. And by 1930, the sport was ready for its absolute ultimate stage, with FIFA hosting the very first World Cup down in Uruguay. But you have to keep in mind the incredibly humble beginnings of this massive spectacle. For that very first World Cup in 1930, only 13 teams actually showed up. Why? Well, flying wasn't really an option yet, and taking a boat across the Atlantic to South America was ridiculously inconvenient and took weeks. The global spectacle we all know today literally started as a logistical nightmare that only a baker's dozen of dedicated teams were willing to endure.
But hey, the seed was planted, and from there, the modern growth is just staggering. The invention of television took this local obsession and turned it into a truly shared global spectacle. Suddenly, players weren't just athletes, they were artists. Legends like Pelé and Maradona turned the sport into high art, mesmerizing audiences worldwide. Fast forward to today, and that 2022 World Cup final drew an estimated audience in the hundreds of millions. From a medieval village brawl to humanity's most watched event. Incredible.
Which brings us to the main takeaway of our explainer today. Football wasn't invented by some single genius sitting in a room having a eureka moment. It was built entirely by accident. It was shaped by ancient soldiers killing time, medieval villagers fighting over a pig bladder, schoolboys arguing over rules in a pub, and everyday workers just needing a weekend distraction. Every single time someone tried to kill it, it just shaped shape and kept right on going. It conquered the world simply because it was just too good to stop.
As we wrap up this incredible narrative of survival and evolution, I want to toss a question over to you. Think about all that chaos we just covered, the hacking, the pig bladders, the total lack of rules. What is the wildest forgotten rule from football history that you would bring back today? Ponder that the next time you see 22 players step onto a perfectly manicured pitch. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the history behind the things we love.